started here, note that the equipment and so on that I use when I'm talking about mats, sluices, or anything, I may mention a brand name. That that company or that brand or whatever does not sponsor me in any way. I get nothing out of it. It's just what I prefer to use. All right. I cannot speak on somebody else's equipment if I'm not using it. So by avoiding misunderstandings, I tell people what I use, plain and simple. Now, today we're going to be covering the use of matting versus a sluice. I will be using my multi-sluice from GoldHog as an example because I'm doing it out in the yard. I need a water flow and it just works best for that. The same principles can be applied to a high banker. They can be applied to a stream sluice. Any of these, it works the same. All right. So if you don't want to watch the whole 36-minute video, and or you want further, more in-depth on this stuff, what I'm doing here is I will list Doc's proportional force video from GoldHog. That's where I first heard the term used. He covers it very well. I will also add a link to GoldHog in case you want to look at any of their stuff. And you can look at the specs. I'll put a link on there. This is what I am using. I have made some significant changes. You notice these are little round things. That little nibby there makes it very difficult for me to put them on and off. The little round things, they do have it where you can angle them, but with the way that I do mine, I don't need that. And I found that these things just sink right into the sand. So I will in the video mention the changes that I made concerning those for my own use. You'll notice here they have this container on the top. This is good for cleaning and so on. They have said that you could use it as a little mini high banker. I made, because they don't carry an attachment for that, I made myself a high banker attachment to fit this. And we'll cover just a little bit of that in the video as well. So let's get started on this. These 3 links will be down in the description. And again, remember, I'm not being sponsored or anything by any of these companies, by Seaflow or whatever. It's the stuff that I use. All right? Let's get going. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about proportional force. Now, the first time I heard this term, I was watching some videos at goldhog.com, and the gentleman that does these, he goes by Doc, was explaining this, and it made such perfect sense to me whenever I take new people and I teaching them the basics. It's much simpler to understand than trying to explain hydrodynamics, physics, and all the other stuff that goes into running a sluice. What I've got here is my old, I say old because I've had it for several years, is my GoldHog multi-sluice. Now, granted, over the years I've made some modifications so that it fits my needs better. And some of these may have already been thought of and done in the newer versions of this. I am not sure. The old version came with round rods that went straight down. And this was fine if you were using it on a stable, flat surface. But I've repurposed this. I use it for a lot of different things. And a lot of times, if I'm out like on a river or something, using it as a high banker, I am on soft sand, so I need something a bit more stable. So what I did is I went with a square and it goes down, and then it goes at an angle and down. This gives me a wider stability platform. Also, I have a couple of heavy rubber mats that I'll lay right underneath these, underneath the feet, and it keeps the water from washing back and washing sands and stuff over them, and or causing them to sink into the liquefied sands where I'm working. This up here, this is the box that comes with it. I use this a lot of different ways. The way Doc shows it is it's up like here, coming down. I remove that so I can pull this out now. This is a removable piece. And so I can bring this down and adjust it to different flow ratios using a 1100 GPS pump. Another thing that I did with this is I made a flip back for a top flow box feeder, which I may do a video on that later. And this is a 3D printed hose. This is done by Gold Brothers. And what I did is I made this is basically a high banker box that will fit onto here. And I have it to where with this it's adjustable, so I can adjust the angle and so on. And again, that comes into play with what we're going to be discussing in a minute. And so I can run the multi-sluice as a cleaning system, which is what it was originally designed for. I can run it as a regular wash system. I can run it as a high banker now. And so this, anytime I'm using a pump, I use anywhere from a 110 GPH up to a 3500 GPH pump with this. And the only difference that I do is I may change the matting or the angle. Now Doc gets into this. If you go watch the GoldHog.com video section and look for proportional force, you will find it there, and he goes more into detail on this. That's why I suggest them. They have some good training videos, some good explanations. My primary thing of doing videos is to direct people to acquiring information. So let's get started. 1, GoldHog does not pay me for anything. I get nothing from them. I pay the full prices for their stuff to date, hint, hint, and all of that. But I do refer to them in a lot of my videos because they got good stuff, okay? I've been doing this for close to 40 years, on and off. And I have done gold panning, mineral hunting, all over the continental United States, up into Canada, all the way up into Alaska. And this is just some of the best stuff. There are people out there that may say otherwise, and that's up to each individual. So, on to matting. The basic idea that you want is a mat is to hold your gold. And the primary thing that decides whether that gold is held in place or not is the riffles on the mat and the speed of the water flow. Now, here, with this, I could change my pump and change the amount of water flow. I could take this off, and there's a little adapter that goes in here to reduce the water flow. But if I am using a regular sluice with an open flare, I don't have those options. I'm running by the amount of water that's coming down that stream. And a lot of people try to adjust the water, the amount of water flow, by building up stones to increase it and so on. All of my sluices have these legs. The size of the sluice determines the size of the legs. My stream sluices as well. And the reason is I can adjust this up and down, left and right, vertical, horizontal, however you want to call it. And what I do is I will come down here and I have my little app. Now, I've noticed in a lot of the GoldHog stuff, Doc uses a side elevation thing. I like this one. Now you notice I'm sitting at a negative 5.1 incline, and I'm at a 0.1 center mass. I would do any other refining on this once I started putting material through it. I normally like to have my material clear. In other words, if I dump material into my flare or up into this area, I like to see it clear within 3 to 5 seconds. And that means it's cleared all the way down, and now I've only got whatever's caught in the riffles. And I'll do this about 5 or 6 times. And what I'm wanting to make sure of is that material is not building up in here. I want it cleaning this. I want to see that stuff moving in there, or what they call dancing. And so now let's say this is the mat. This is a series of GoldHog mats that I use for Rhine, Donau, and so on. It's a really, really fine. About the largest you're going to find is a 1 millimeter, maybe a 1.5 if you're lucky. And so you need something that's going to keep a low flow. The higher your water, the less action is going on down at the bottom, and so it can silt up. The lower your water, the more action, and so it's sort of a balancing match. The count, that 3 to 5 second cleaning process, tells you whether you've got that angle right or not based upon the water flow. So a couple of mats that I use. This is a GoldHog mat here. As I said, a lot of my stuff is GoldHog. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And this is basically a stripping mat. And you'll see we've got different factors here along the way. And this is the clean stuff, maybe a 1/4 of an inch in size. Okay. And they're normally, for something about a 1/4 of an inch on GoldHog mats with the 1100, they talk about an average of 7-degree angle. We're running such much finer stuff, and supposedly their mats will catch that. So this is another type of mat. This is a real low flow mat, real low water flow. And so the larger rocks and so on will run off of those, and your fine gold gets caught. What I like to do with this is do a little back cut in these riffles, just enough to give it a turn. And this here is what a lot of people in Germany use, which is this real fine mat. It's real good at catching fine gold. The trouble is that if you have larger flakes, they'll dance right over that and out. And that's why I like using the these come in sections and they're attached, and I like using them for those. If you send a 30-second video of your sluice running, whether you're using a pump or whatever your primary method is of running, send a good angled video of that to GoldHog. They can actually look at it and give you a very good approximation of what matting you would need based upon the length of the sluice and your water flow, the rate of your water flow speed, and so on. Again, though, that water flow is going to change if you change that angle.
So the higher the angle, the more the water flow. The faster the water flow, the lower the water level. However, it can wash stuff out if your riffles are too small. If you're using real large real small riffles like that, you want a bit of a higher water flow so that gold doesn't get stirred up there in that sedimentary layer and get washed out on you. Now, how do I test my stuff? Well, one way that I test my stuff, what I like to do is when I'm testing new mats and so on, is I get classic playground sand. This says it's running from a 2 millimeter and up. Okay, that's fairly small. But like I said, your average gold is going to be about 1 millimeter if you're in Germany. I've got piles of gravel and stuff on the other side, different size gravel, that I can also use that I test different angles on the mat. And so, like, if I'm looking at wanting to keep a 0, 1 to 2, what I would really like to do is I would throw in some larger stuff, say a 6 millimeter gravel. And then when I wash it through here, what I want to see is that sand sitting in here dancing. It will clear out slowly, but it will clear out because sand is lighter than gold. But I want to see that heavier gravel wash out first, and then that other lighter material wash out after that. Now, the best way that I can tell you, depending on your mat, is if you take a stream sluice, for instance, and take that to your stream and you set it up, and you dump your stuff in there and it's flowing out too fast. What a lot of people have to wind up doing is trying to block that waterway. With the legs, I can adjust that automatically. If it's a real low water stream, very, very little water, I will dig out a trench just big enough to run this in at about a 5-degree incline. And then I can, having this resting on the waterbed, if this is where my flare is, right here, I would have this resting right on the top of the waterbed, this angling down, that the stuff would get washed out. And if I do a slight cleaning trench out, it'll just keep flowing right out. I may have to clean that up every once in a while of the finer sediments and stuff, but it allows me to get that angle that I control the speed of the water. If you can control the speed of the water, you're well on your way to being able to control the amount of gold that you're capturing. Mind you, water speed and angle is not the only thing. Your material density, material size, all of this weighs a factor into it. And this is why, looks like I'm going to have to get a new mat soon. That's starting to really wear out. I've had these mats for about 5 years. But what you want is to ensure that you can run that water speed versus your angle. If you can get your water speed and your angle down, you will capture more gold. But anytime you change the angle, anytime you change the water speed, all of that's going to change other factors in your gold sluice. So if you want a good running video of this with more PowerPoint explanations and so on, go to GoldHog.com, GoldHog.com. Look in their videos and look for proportional force. And you'll find that there should be a thing in there on the multi-sluice, all sorts of stuff. And it's a real good resource to go to. And like I said, I use a lot of their stuff simply because I know it works over the years. So let's get going on this. The first thing I do when I set my sluice up in a stream, my high bank or whatever, I run water through it. And here, you start seeing here these water bubbles. These will cause gold to ride over your sluice, and you'll lose it. So what I like to do, and you'll see Dan Hurd, a lot of these guys do this, is they take a brush and they simply clean the water bubbles out of the sluice riffles. I don't know if they explain this a lot. Some of them do, some of them don't. But you want to get all those air bubbles out of there. Also this, if you have any small gravel or something stuck in there from your last cleaning, it can also help clean that stuff out. You really want to keep your mats clean of small built-up material. Otherwise, again, it can affect your water flow, affect your capture rate, all sorts of things. As they say, what is that? Cleanliness is like next to godliness. So, there we go. I'm seeing a couple of little pieces there that I missed on my cleanup as I'm talking about it. Alright, so right now we have a 1100 GPH running. Now I can, because I've redone this, I can bring this up and I could move that back. And actually build a higher water flow. See, now I'm getting more water in there. It's a little bit deeper. Okay. I can bring this back. When I do this, you'll notice the turbidity is lost in here. So I'm going to have an issue with stirring that material up. So you want to keep that turbidity moving in there. No matter what you're doing, you want it turbulent up here, so that water flow, real small gold, real flat gold likes to float. And if you're running dry material, like off of a sand beach or something, this stuff can float right on top and right out of your sluice. So you want some turbulence up there in the beginning, so that it forces that stuff down. And so I can adjust this by how much turbulence I want in there, based on what unit I'm using. If it's a stream or whatever, you can't really get that in there too much. And that's why you want to start some kind of a riffle in the front. A lot of people have real small flat to catch it, and this works, but that second phase in there, you don't want a straight mat of the same thing. The second phase in there, you want it to cause turbulence. So anything that's floating gets broken up and will break that surface tension and drop down to go through the rest of your sluice. Otherwise, you're going to lose gold. So let's get this bag open and run a test. This is a prime example. This stuff is really dry. So I would either want to get it wet in a different bucket, but since I'm using this, I know I can test this dry. It's gonna stir that up. So all I'm gonna do is take me a scoop. I'm doing this backwards for the video. I want to run it into here, and you can see that. Now, gravity does not lie. You'll notice my my little bubble level told me that this was level, but as you see here, I've got water over here, but I've got a lot more over there. So let me raise that side a little bit. And again, doing it with the legs, I don't have to shuffle or move the sluice. All I have to do is lift that leg a little bit to get that angle. All right, the next thing I want to do now is start checking what my angle is. You'll notice most of that material is washed out, but I've still got some larger pebbles in there that's not getting out of there. So I want to raise, in this case I would be raising my front or lowering my back, and that will again depend upon the stream and the situation. If I'm using a high banker or this and so on, I prefer to raise the back side rather than lower the front. It gives me more control. So what I'm going to do is I have this little place bar that goes on here. And now since I've done that, you'll notice by adjusting this level here, I'm setting perfectly at 0. And I'm at a 6.2. Now generally for this multi-sluice, for real fine material, they suggest about a 7-degree angle. I have dropped it lower, all the way to almost a 9 when I had a lot of heavy material. But you'll notice I've still got stuff dancing down here. See how it's dancing? So it's still moving material down, but you'll notice these larger pieces here, they're not moving at all. So my angle, I can tell for the amount of water flow that's going through here, my angle is not enough to move that larger 1/4 inch non-gold silicates and so on out of there. So I'm going to lower this. On my case, I'm going to raise my end. If I was in a stream where I couldn't do that, I would lower the other one, which is why you dig a running trench underneath it. And we will see what that is once I start getting that material moved out of there. So now I'm setting it about an 8.9, 8.8 degree angle. I'm slightly canted off a little bit to one side, but my water flow down here is even, so I'm not going to worry about trying to get it right on the money. However, you notice now all that larger material is now gone. It's moved down and it's now already worked its way down to here. The one thing I do not want to see is gold past my 75% mark. If I'm seeing gold down here, I'm running either at the wrong angle or too high of a water speed. Let's run another thing through here and see how it looks. See, that clears up fairly fast. I've got some buildup here on my larger ridge, but you'll see even there, didn't catch it. It's moving those larger pieces. See here? It's moving those larger pieces out of there, while I'm still retaining material up along here. So that tells me for this, at this current flow rate and so on, for this material, I would start capturing gold, and it's going to start piling up here. That means this material is going to wash out from this point down, which is again at about my 75. Some people say 25, some people say 50. I like about 75 because sometimes I use a 2-meter sluice. But you can see that dancing around in there. It's moving all that heavier material. We're not seeing any of that heavier stuff built up as much until we get down past that 75% mark. So we're going to run about half of the sand and then wash it and see if there's any gold in this. And we should, in theory, capture some of this, and because this is from a company out off of the Rhine-Palatine area, the Rhine River area, it may have gold in it. It'll give us an idea of if this is capturing the gold or not. Once I'm done with that, I've tested my mats and I'm good to go. I decided to go ahead and run the entire thing. So out of 25 kilo of that sand, that's what I have left. It took me about 15-20 minutes to run it. And what I like to do is I do this and one other step I'll go over. If I'm making cement or I'm using sand and I'm buying bags of sand, I like to do this because I'm recovering gold. I'm making a little bit of that money that I spent on that sand back in one form or another. So let's go ahead and pan this out and see how much gold is in here. So a little quick panning. And I have a lot of the finer stuff. Finer gold is floating. But you can see there's several pieces. I've got maybe 10 specks in there. It's not too bad. I mean, that was a double filtered and a very small grain or kernel size for the sand. But now I'm going to go to the second phase, which is I will now find out how much gold I missed on that angle with that. And to do that, I've got to change mats, so I'll be right back. So this is my test. I ran it. I used my mat that I plan to use on this next outing. Okay, so I know I'm going to the Rhine River. I've used my mat. I've tested it with the sand. I see how much gold I got out of that particular deposit. What I want to find out is if I'm losing any gold off of that mat over there. The way that I do this is I go to a very, very small ribbed mat. You can see it there. You can buy this at OB, BGU. You can buy them in the rolls. It's a real little small riffle mat. I've laid it in. And the only thing that I am changing at this point is the slope or angle of the sluice, because I want to reduce that water flow or the water speed. And so I'm reducing the pitch, I guess you would call it, the pitch, and I'm changing the mat. Much smaller mat, it does not require as fast of a water flow because the riffles are all continuous, they're all very small. So I want basically a high water level coming through here so that I don't have as much disturbance on the bottom. And I do that by reducing the elevation or angle of my sluice. So let's now run this test. Same sand, it's wet now. So I can run it, same sand, just my my classifier mat and a change in the elevation. Right now I've got it at a negative 0.1. I don't know if you can see that because of the, there we go. And then I will adjust this slightly again depending upon how fast that mat cleans. Okay, so I ran it. You'll notice the water here, I don't know if you can tell, is higher now because I'm pumping as much water, but hang on, there we go. I'm pumping as much water, 1,100. It's running at the same spots, and I've now ran 2 shovels. I've leveled everything. I can now, if you see here, I'll test it. You'll see how it cleans it. Takes it about 3 to 4 seconds to clean. I am currently at a I'm at a 0.9 degree angle. So I'm almost level. I'll raise that a little bit because it's cleaning just a little too fast for me. So we've got about a negative 0.8 incline. This takes about 5 to 6 seconds to clear. You see how it's already clearing up? We'll move the rest of that down. I'm running it very slow. I want it to have almost a 10-second cleanup. That allows any of that real fine gold to get captured at this point. I want hardly any water movement at all. You notice down here, I'm getting a little bit more of a cleaning here than over here. So I may drop that just a little bit so that it flows off evenly. And now we'll run the test. So we did that. That took me about 20 minutes to do that. And now we're going to pan this out and see if there's any gold. In theory, there should be no gold there. And or maybe 1 or 2 flakes. I don't want to be losing more than 1 or 2 flakes for every 10 flakes that my mat is capturing. It's just a basics is how I run it. You have to calculate, is it worth my time to try to catch every bit of that gold, which you're not going to do anyway, versus the amount of material I can move. More material, more gold captured. Also, it equates to more gold lost. So you have to find that balance that you're happy with. Let's pan this and see what we've got. So, we got that panned, and you can see how some of that stuff is floating. And that real fine gold will do that on you. It will float on you. But out of this, I only have 3 specks. Out of all of that, once I ran it a second time, so the first time I had about 10 or so. The test means I'm losing about 3 flakes for every 10, so about, 30%? Which case then that tells me I need to raise the elevation of my sluice to a little bit less of an angle. And that will help capture another, 10 or 20% of that gold. You're not going to catch all of it, but this is how I fine-tune my stuff. To know on each of mine, on the back of my mats, and permanent paint marker, I have marked the degree and the pump rate. So I can, when I pull up a mat, I can look at it and I already know the approximate degree angle that I want to run that mat. So if I'm running a double sluice, the first one may be running a 2 or 3 degree angle. Let's say a 5 degree angle, wash down the heavier stones, and then the other one would run a lesser angle, or I'd run a less angle on the front, just enough to move those any of the larger stones off, and then a slightly deeper degree angle with a higher cut ripper mat or something that would catch that gold. So there you go. That's it in a nutshell.